Hi. So we're continuing with Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, and we're in Perek Daled, chapter 4. We're up to Mishnah number Yudtet 19. If you've got the Lev Shalem Sidur, it's on page 250. If you're using any other copy, chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot, Mishnah number 19. So we start with as heavy a question as there is, not only in Judaism, but in all religion. And here we read, Rabbi Yanai Rabbi Yanai says, Ein biadenu, it is not in our hands. Lo, mishalvat harishaim, neither why the wicked seem to prosper, v'af, nor lo miyisurei hatzadikim, why the righteous seem to suffer. He's basically saying, the way they translate it here, tranquility of the wicked, suffering of the righteous, these are beyond human understanding. The Hebrew actually says it's not in our hands to figure out, to understand, to know, neither why the rich, why the evil get away with what they do, become rich and live wonderful lives, nor why the righteous seem to suffer. Here we have the ultimate question of religion. You may remember from college, they refer to this issue as theodicy, the question of, God doing right or wrong. And this is the ultimate question. God tells us to do the commandments, we follow the commandments, and we suffer. There must be a problem here. There's something wrong. Either God is lying, or there is no God. What could possibly be the answer to this? So back in the Torah, the traditional answer was, if you remember the second paragraph of the Shema, V'haya im shamoa. If you listen to the commandments of God, then the sky will open up, the rains will come, the crops will grow, and you will prosper. But if you don't, then the skies will be sealed, there'll be no rain, there will be famine and drought, and you will quickly disappear. The Torah is pretty clear that it's all black and white. Do good, you're rewarded. Do bad, you will be punished. And that's the basic concept. We find the first major question about that coming in the book of Job. And the book of Job is maybe 500, 600, 700 years or more after the time of the Torah. And the premise of the book of Job, of course, is that there's a righteous man and he suffers terribly. Not only does he lose his children, he loses his possessions, he suffers physically, and when his friends come to try to comfort him, to pay a Shiva call, ultimately they provide him with the theology of the Torah. If bad stuff happened to you, it's because you must have done wrong. You are being punished. Therefore, repent and do the right thing, and you could make it up with God. Job refuses to believe that this is true. He says, I'm not perfect, but if I did anything bad, certainly didn't deserve my children dying and everything else that happened to me. So the book goes on for many chapters, arguing back and forth, and ultimately the answer of the book, towards the very end, is that God actually appears to Job. And God tells him the following. Number one, your friends are wrong. Number two, you're right. And number three, you'll never figure out why I, God, do what I do. It's beyond human comprehension. Now, that may not be a satisfying answer, but it ultimately is a realistic answer. That God says to man, you can't figure out, you can't know my ways. It's beyond human comprehension. So you just do the right thing and that's it. So some people are not happy with Job's answer either. They don't like what the Torah says, doesn't seem to be true, and they're not happy with this, we can't ever know. Rabbi Yanai is basically giving us the answer of the book of Job, which is it's not in our hands. You'll never know. That didn't stop our people from coming up with all sorts of different possibilities. Why do good people seem to suffer in life? And why do bad people seem to get away with murder? So look, one traditional answer is that you can be rewarded or punished in this world or in the next world. You're not going to escape reward or punishment, but it might come now or it might come later. And it may very well be that if you had to choose, right, years of suffering on earth versus eternity, right, being suffering or being rewarded, better to take your punishment now and get it over with. So there are very traditional people who will answer, why do the good suffer? Because they are getting their punishment for whatever they did wrong. Now, when they get to heaven, they'll have a clean slate and they'll have the rest of eternity to be rewarded and to have good things. And the people that seem to be getting away with murder, they're getting whatever rewards there are in life now. When they get to heaven, right, they will ultimately begin to receive whatever punishments they come, and that will be for eternity. It's a whole other class as to is there a heaven, is there a hell, do Jews believe in hell? But that's how traditional people will try to explain, if they have to explain, the ultimate issue of the righteous who suffer and the wicked who prosper. And here you have Rabbi Yanai, instead of promising things that he doesn't know, he can't know what's going to be in the world to come, Rabbi Yanai simply says, Ein biyadenu. We can't know. It's not up to us, and it's a mystery. You can bet everything that Rabbi Yanai would say, despite that, we should still obey God. We should still follow the Torah. Those are the things that we need to do. So there we have the teaching of Rabbi Yanai. By the way, there are other possible answers. I'm not sure any of them are satisfactory to us, but some will say, and you have places here and there in the in rabbinic literature, even in the Bible, you will find that some will seem to say, sometimes God chastises us in order to teach us a lesson, in order to make us stronger, right? So those aren't answers that we necessarily like either. But yes, it's possible that you don't deserve this, but God gave you this terrible thing in your life in order to help you to become wiser, to appreciate what it is that you have. So you can go this way, you can go that way. Rabbi Yanai seems to just say, Ein biadenu. We can never know. And some people would take the attitude, well, if I can't know, and if you can't promise me, then what's the point of doing good? Why bother? And that's a serious challenge to the religious life. But then again, you got to remember what we learned all the way back in chapter 1, that be like a servant who serves his master not in order to receive a reward. Okay? The reason that you do good is not because you're hoping that it's going to pay off. You do good because it's the right thing to do. Again, whether people can buy into that and accept that, that becomes another issue. But that's where Rabbi Yanai comes out on this major question. Okay, we move on to Mishnah Kaf, Mishnah 20, and we read Rabbi Matya ben Harash. Okay, Rabbi Matya says, have a makdim b'shalom. You should always be the first to offer peace or to say hello, to greet. Makdim from the word kodam, before. You should come first in offering shalom. And this, in the sense here, not of war and peace, but in the sense of, hi, how are you? Shalom aleichem. You should always be the first one to wish people well, to call Adam, to every person, not just the people that you like, but to every single person you greet. And then the second statement he brings us is, Veheve zanav la'arayot. It is better to be the tail of a lion, va'al tehi rosh la'shualim, rather than being the head of a fox. Very strange. What is he talking about? Tails of lions and heads of foxes. May very well be that this is the Hebrew way, the rabbinic way of saying, is it better to be a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in the big pond? Except there, the little fish in the big pond could be in danger. Remember that Rabbi Matya is speaking to rabbis, and maybe he's telling them, if you have to choose which synagogue you're going to go to, right? It is better to be the tail of a lion. Maybe he's saying it's better to be in a huge, large synagogue that has a number of rabbis, and maybe you're the assistant rabbi, or maybe you're the ritual director, and there's a senior rabbi, and there's an associate rabbi, and there's an assistant rabbi, and you're way down on the, better to be at that kind of place, right? The tail of lions, of great people around you, rather than to be a rosh of the shualim. Right? To be the head of a small place where, yeah, you're the number one guy, but, you know, you're not, it's not a place that's recognized. So clearly in the 2nd century, we weren't talking about rabbis taking jobs in different shuls. Perhaps he was talking about which community do you associate with. Remember, Jerusalem has been destroyed. People are moving out into all different ways. They're going to have to establish places of teaching and learning Torah. We've already seen before that if you're going to go into exile, into Golah, better to go to a place of Torah. Maybe Rabbi Matya is teaching us the same thing, that if you go to a place, as lovely as it might be, right, if there are no people for you to learn from, right? No, you're the tail. There's no lion for you to turn to. Then better, you should better be a small fish in learning from the big pond, from the great rabbis that you yourself can depend upon. So two very different approaches to life, but it's always fascinating to try to guess, given the circumstances in the second century after destruction, under a persecution, dealing with oppression, trying to start Judaism all over again, to disseminate Torah. How do you do it? Where do you do it? And you know what? Being the big guy in a place where there's no one else to learn from, to depend upon, isn't as great as it might initially seem. Next Mishnah, Kaf Aleph. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Rabbi Jacob Yaakov says, Haolam hazeh, this world, domet, is similar to a prosdor. A prosdor would be a foyer, right? When you first come into a house. Bifnei ha'olam haba. You walk into the place and there's a small room. It's where maybe you wipe off your muddy shoes, you hang up your coat before you go into the actual room. So Rabbi Yaakov is saying this world is like the foyer, right? It's in this world where you wipe your shoes off, you hang up your coat, and you get ready to go into Olam Haba, the world to come. And then he tells us, and if that's the case, Hatkein atzmach, you should prepare yourself, beprosdor. Once you're in that foyer, the entranceway, okay, prepare yourself. In other words, while you're alive on earth, all of earth is really a preparation for what comes after it. Kedei shetikanes litraklin, so that you will be worthy, so that you will be able to enter the traklin, the main hall. Again, interesting, the use of these two words, prosdor and traklin, seem to be Greek words. And even though we're in Palestine in the second century, we still see the influence of Greek culture at this time. And the words prosdor, meaning, from the root of before. Okay, prosdor is this foyer, the entranceway, and traklin could be a banquet hall or could be the main hall when you enter into a typical Roman rich person's home. So one of the things that we see here is that Rabbi Yaakov and the people he's speaking to clearly are working under the assumption that there's this world and there is the next world. There's very little that we read about what the next world looks like, what happens, how you get there. Christianity has, a lot more because in a sense, Christianity is all about getting into heaven. And of course, the methodology of getting into heaven in Christianity is simply acknowledging that Jesus is the Savior. If you do that, you're in. Don't need anything else. And that's one of the main ways that Christianity differed from Judaism. Clearly to the rabbis, there was a sense that there is a world to come. Can't tell you what it looks like, can't tell you what happens there, but I'll tell you how to get there. The way you get there is by doing mitzvot and ma'asim tovim. Follow the commandments, do good deeds, repent of doing the bad things that you've done. That's how you get into Olam Haba. There's a very complex system, and there's no one idea, but you find many different beliefs among Jews. First of all, if we go back to the Torah and the Bible, we don't see very much at all about a world to come. Apparently, after the Torah period, during the Bible period, so from 1000 BCE on, there was a belief that when you died, all souls went to Sheol, Sheol. Sheol is a place underground. It's not that the bad go there. It's not that the good, everybody goes there, Sheol. What happens there? It's dark, you're thirsty, and beyond that, we don't know much. Okay, so that was the idea, and it's just hinted at in the Bible and not really developed very much. Later, the latest parts of the Bible, maybe the book of Daniel, we studied that a couple years ago, there seems to be the very first hints about some kind of existence for the righteous after this world. But again, we don't know very much. Later on, we have a whole bunch of issues. We have the issue of Olam Haba, the world to come. We have issues of Yemot HaMashiach, the days of the Messiah. After God sends the Messiah, history will seemingly change and existence will change, but how? We're not really sure. Originally, the Messiah was considered simply a descendant of David who would lead the Jewish people to victory over their foes and establish peace and tranquility. But later, the Messiah is seen to be a kind of a superhuman figure who would defeat our enemies, but who would bring in what's called Yemot HaMashiach, the messianic time, the days of the Messiah. And all of life and all of history would be different. How? There's only hints about it. We don't really know. Then we have a third category, besides Olam Haba and Yemot HaMashiach, we have Tchiyat HaMeitim. And in the first century, second century, there was among many Jews a strong belief in the resurrection, the physical resurrection of the dead. That those people who had died would come out of their graves and would live again. And you have the first hints about that, maybe in the book of Ezekiel and the Valley of the Dry Bones, and how all these bones, and again, this goes back to around the year 600 BCE, and all these dead bones would come together and would have muscle and skin and breath, and they would live again. Now, whether Ezekiel meant that in a metaphorical sense or in a literal sense, we can't know. But there was this idea, certainly by the first and second century, that all those who were dead would live again, and they would come back to life. And this notion becomes a part of the Amidah, the second part of the Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim literally means we praise God who revives, who resurrects the dead. Okay? And look, the Christian notion of what happened to Jesus, I believe in the resurrection. Well, that all comes from a Jewish idea originally, and of course, Christians embraced that and took it wherever they took it. But the Jews had that idea beforehand. So we have all of these notions, and Jews did not spend a great deal of time trying to picture or worry about the world to come. We believe in it, whatever will be, will be. Whereas in Christianity, it becomes critical, and all those stories about, meeting Saint Peter at the gates of heaven and all of those things, and angels with wings, dead people become angels. This is very different from the Jewish notion of an angel, who are a different category of creation, of being that God created at the very beginning of creation, the process there. So we do have, in the late Middle Ages, we do have, in maybe the 18th, 19th century, among Yiddish songs and folklore, a notion, and there's a beautiful Yiddish song, what's going to happen, in the world to come. And they imagine it's a banquet. And in this song, they say, and I'll tell you what they're serving at the banquet. It's the Leviathan, the great sea monster that God created at the beginning of the world. And it's Shur Habor. It's a huge giant. So there's going to be fish and meat are going to be served at this banquet. And what's going to happen? What's the program at this banquet in heaven? So we're told that at this banquet, Moses is going to get up and he's going to give words of Torah. And then Solomon will be called upon, and he will give you a proverb, words of wisdom. And then David will probably bring out his harp, and he will entertain us. And Miriam, sister of Moses, she will lead us in dancing. So, in folklore, you have, yes, there's going to be a banquet, and here's what they're going to serve, and here's what the program is. But none of that, do we find, certainly not in the Bible, and very little of it do we find in the early rabbinic literature. So what we do know is previously, Rabbi Yanai said, no figuring out why in this world the good people suffer and bad people get away with murder. Now we see Rabbi Yaakov says, but I can guarantee you that there is going to be something after this world. So you would be advised to prepare yourself now while you can, so that you can get into that world. Next Mishnah, Kaf Bet 22. Rabbi Yaakov continues, and as long as we're dealing with this world and the next world, he's got another thought for us. He says as follows: Yafa, wonderful, pretty, good, nice, is sha'a achat, 1 hour, b'tshuva uv'ma'asim tovim, 1 hour of, we often translate tshuva as repentance. That's probably more of a Christian word and concept. For Jews, teshuva is basically returning, from the word shuv, to return. So 1 hour of returning and doing good deeds, ba'olam hazeh, in this world, is yafa, is better, is nicer than kol chayei ha'olam haba, than the entire world to come. Think about it. He's just told us there's a world to come. But 1 hour spent doing good deeds in this life is better than all the world to come. But then, listen to what he then says. V'yafa, and better, is sha'a achat shel korat ruach ba'olam haba, and 1 hour of bliss in the world to come is yafa, is better mikol chayei ha'olam hazeh, than all of this life. 1 hour in the world to come is better than anything that you will get in 70 to 100 years on earth. But he just contradicted himself, because he just told us, but 1 hour on this planet doing good deeds and returning is better than everything in the world to come. Well, it's a contradiction. You can't have it both ways. Make up your mind. But I think that's his point precisely. So many times we've seen that one of the ways that the rabbis function is by giving us outlandish statements which are meant not so much literally, but which are meant to grab our attention. So what's he telling us? You want to get into the world to come, because the 1 hour in the world to come is better than all the years you're going to spend on earth. Whatever's good about this planet is nothing compared to what you're going to get 1 hour in the world to come. But he tells us 1 hour here doing kind deeds of kindness, good deeds, ma'asim tovim, and teshuvah, returning, right, is better than all of the world to come. So basically, I think besides driving us crazy with this contradiction, Rabbi Yaakov is basically saying, you want to know how to get in, you want to be in the world to come. You want to know how to get there? While you're here in the pros door, going back to his previous statement, while you're in the foyer, you want to spend your time doing ma'asim tovim and teshuvah. He recognizes that we've probably done wrong, so we want to turn around. Never think, I'm a sinner, I'm doomed. You can always change. You can always come back. And I find it interesting that he uses the word ma'asim tovim, good deeds, rather than the word mitzvot. When we think of mitzvot, we often think either ritual commandments or the technical things that God may want us to do. But when we use the term ma'asim tovim, ma'asim from the same word as oseh shalom, to do, something that you do, a deed. Ma'asim tovim, good deeds. And there we get less of the sense of ritual things, that's mitzvot, and more of the ethical things, the acts of kindness that we would show one to the other. We now come to the next teaching, 23, Mishnah number 23. So here we have really a fascinating idea. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer, and he tells us 4 things. Number 1, al tiratzeh et chaverach, do not pacify, do not try to calm down your chaverach, your chaver, your friend, b'sha'at ka'aso, in the hour of his anger. Imagine you've got a best friend, 2 people who are inseparable. You assume that you're supposed to be there for them and with them at all times, in every situation. But ultimately, we're being told, no, there's a time to be there, and there's a time to make yourself invisible, to stay out of it. Okay, and the first example is when your friend is, he's lost it. Steam is coming out of his ears. He is boiling mad. That's not the time to try to calm him down. What Rabbi Shimon is basically saying is that, you know what, if there's going to be an explosion, let there be an explosion. Then that's the time for you to step up and for you to try to help out, to calm things down. But what's going to happen when your friend is mad? Not necessarily at you, could be at somebody else, but you're the one who comes and who puts your arm around them and tries to calm them down and try to make them see logic. chances are they're going to turn on you. They need this outlet. They need to blow off steam. And if you're the one that's there trying to tell them, calm down, you're not thinking this through properly, you're going to be the one who gets the brunt of it. And that may destroy your relationship for good. So he's saying, Bisha'at ka'aso, in the hour of his anger, that's not the time to calm him down. Stay away. Let him blow off steam. Then you have an important role to play, stepping forward and helping him pick up the pieces. Not what we would have expected. But remember, we started chapter 4, the chapter we're in, with Rabbi Ben Zoma, Shimon Ben Zoma, who was telling us, who is rich, who is strong, right? Remember those questions. And the answers were not the things that we would have expected. So here too, another Shimon, this time Shimon ben Elazar, is telling us, you think that as the best friend or the very good friend, your job is to be there all the time. Not necessarily, right? Give people space. There's a time for you to come in, and there's a time for you to leave them alone. Number 2, V'al tenachamenu b'sha'ah, do not try to comfort him in the hour shemeto mutal lefanav, when his dead lies before him. In other words, in the initial hour. Notice in both cases, it speaks about an hour. Now, whether they meant 60 minutes or not, that's not important, but it's a limited period of time. So the second one is somebody close to your best friend has just died. The dead person is still there, okay? Whether it's in the house, whether it's in the hospital, wherever it is, okay? We're talking about the initial hour. And that's not the time to try to comfort them. Now, it may very well be that upon the death, it's necessary for, especially if the survivor is, in a state of shock or can't think properly, arrangements have to be made. Who do we call? What do we do? Right? What happens first? It may very well be that you're sort of hanging back and I don't know what to do now. Okay, first thing, we need to call the funeral home. Second thing, we need to call the immediate, other immediate family members. Okay. Third thing, we've got to make sure we've got the deeds to the cemetery plots. And we've all been there. We understand, that process. What Rabbi Shimon is saying is, don't try to comfort him. You can try to direct him, your friend. You can try to guide him. You can try to help him. You can make some of those calls, but don't tenachamenu, from the word nachem, menachem, to bring comfort. People need time to absorb the loss. And while the dead person is still there, that's not the time for comforting, right? You've got to, if there are stages of mourning, right? The first one, we're not even going to believe it. How could this have happened? It can't be true. So we need to absorb it. We need to get over our initial shock, right? And then we have to, how could this have happened? Who's to blame? What's going on? We go through some or all of those stages of grief and mourning. You can help, but you can't comfort, not yet. So comfort really can only begin after the burial. And indeed, if you think about it, if it takes ideally 24 hours after a death, within 24 hours for the burial to happen. And as soon as the burial is done, as soon as we've done, the very last thing we can do for the deceased, right? We've taken, we're concerned about their dignity, the body, and their honor, and we've dealt with all of those issues. We've now buried them. Now we move from the process of taking care of them to trying to deal with our own shock and grief and bereavement. And what happens traditionally, as soon as the grave is filled and we have fulfilled our obligations to the dead, at that moment, those people who have accompanied the mourner to the cemetery, they form two lines, almost so that, the person at the grave the survivor might want to just say, I don't want to leave here. I can't leave here. And by forming two lines, it's almost as if those people, family and friends, are saying, it's, rolling out a carpet, but in a different way. This is the way you go. You can't stay there. You have to go, and this is the direction. And even if you weren't going to stay there at the grave, I'm looking around, I don't know where to go. And people may not even know where are the cars and what happens now, right? By forming two lines, in a sense, we're telling the person, go this way, right? This will get you from the grave back to the road, from the road to the cars. Cars will bring you back to the house. And it's at that moment, and only at that moment, right? Only after we've finished the burial that we then say to the mourner, Hamakom yinachem etchem. May God comfort you, right? So that's the beginning of the process of trying to comfort somebody who has lost a loved one. But notice that this is, let's assume, 24 hours, maybe it's 48 hours, could even be, because people have to come from far away, it could be 3 days, whatever it is. The bottom line is it's not in the first hour when the dead are still before us and are unburied. That's not the time to try to calm people down, to comfort people. The process of comfort only begins after the burial, and that's at least a day after. Not b'sha'at shemeto mutal lefanav, in the hour when his dead are lying before him. So now we come to the third thing that Rabbi Shimon tells us. Al tishalo b'sha'at nidro. Do not question him. Here they have, do not challenge him in the hour, same word again, in the hour of his vow, of him taking a vow. Remember that back in the Bible, and apparently through early rabbinic times, a vow was something extremely serious. A vow was something that you used God's name. I hereby invoke the name of God. And you would say God's name, which today we never say. Yud He Vav He would actually pronounce God's name. I swear before Adonai that I will not drink anymore. I will not do this anymore. I will not, and you take this, once you've sworn, you've taken a vow, and you've done it with the name of God, that is sacrosanct. Today we have the notion of Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names can never hurt me. Words are meaningless. What are words? But I think we really understand that words can hurt you a lot more than a fist or a rock can, right? You can destroy somebody's spirit for life by vicious words. And it works the other way. Words are so powerful that if you make a promise, you have to keep it. That's why we have the notion, in court. I know one time I had to testify in court, and they understood I was a rabbi, and they didn't make me swear. They said, "Do you affirm?" Right? Because they understood that there are people who take the idea of swearing before God so seriously that they will avoid it in all cases. So in this situation, a person has just, b'sha'at, he's just this hour made this oath. We are told, al tishalo, don't challenge him, don't question him, right? Something comes out of your mouth and your best friend said, "Are you kidding? Why did you say that? This is wrong. You'll never be able to do that. You made a terrible mistake." You know what? Not then. Wait a little bit. If a person comes back and says, "What have I done? I made this vow. I did it because at the moment I wasn't thinking. I was full of enthusiasm about something. But now when I think about it, I realize I've made a terrible mistake. What am I going to do?" Well, in Judaism, we have something that you can do. Think about Kol Nidre. The whole idea of Kol Nidre was that once a year, we got together and we basically say before God, which is why there were 3 people supposed to be on the bima traditionally, the cantor, and then 2 people holding Torahs. And the 3 of them constitute a Beit Din, a court. And the idea was, if we made a vow sometime during the year, we come on Yom Kippur, and we have the ability to say those vows that we made, even though at the time we may have been serious about them, we were unable or are unable to fulfill them. Please, God, don't count it against us. So we have a method. If you backed yourself into the corner of a vow, you can get out of it. There are ways to get out of it. There's also, besides Kol Nidre, there's something called Hatarat Nidarim. Originally, this was a custom that took place before Rosh Hashanah, that people gathered before a Beit Din and they said, "I made a vow and I wish to be released from it." Hatarat, unloosing, releasing from this vow that I made. And that was done. Later on, it was moved from before Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur when more people were available, and then became part of the service as well. So the message of Rabbi Shimon is, somebody, your best friend, says something very rash, has sworn that he's going to do this. That's not the time to challenge him. That'll come later. For now, because ultimately, what are you going to say? You'll never be able to do that. What were you thinking? So now, either he's going to feel terrible, my God, he's right, or he's going to say, "You don't trust me, you don't believe in me, you don't think I can do what I said I'm going to do." And now you become, the target. That's not the time to challenge him. If he needs help later, you need to be there. And finally, the 4th of the 4 comments of Rabbi Shimon is V'al tishtadel liroto. Do not try to see him b'sha'at kalkalato, in the hour of his disgrace. Okay, all of us in life have either done something so stupid, so embarrassing, right, that we are mortified, right, at what we have done. And you're the best friend, and your best friend has just, whether it's publicly or in whatever the issue is, he has been laughed at, humiliated, disgraced. Everybody is looking at him, snickering, right? He is beyond embarrassed, feels terrible, right? What are you supposed to do as the best friend? Well, we would assume you go in, you put your arm around him, you give him a hug, you say, don't worry, it's not so bad, everything will be all right, okay? Rabbi Shimon is saying he needs alone time, right? You need to be there, but not right now. Give him an hour. And it's, again, fascinating that in these four things, when your friend is angry, when he's just lost a relative, when he's just made a vow, when he's become totally disgraced in the public eye, right? For an hour, he needs his own time. Step back, let him alone. Now, this becomes, a critical question, and there's no right or wrong answer in the manual. The question is, well, how much time do I give him? The fact that they use the word sha'ah, the hour of his, they didn't mean 60 minutes, right? You check your watch and, 63 minutes later, you're there. It could be several hours. It could be, 20 minutes. But the point is that even though you're a chaver, the best friend, you still need to respect that person's privacy and, for a little bit of time, aloneness. Now, sometimes we go too far, in the other direction. There are people who are intruding. Look, there are people, some of us intrude when we need to stay away. But sometimes we make the opposite mistake. We stay away too long, either because we're uncomfortable or for whatever other reason. And after the sha'ah, after the hour of his anger or of his grief or of his vow or of his disgrace, right, we don't show up at all. And how often do we hear, people who have just been through Shiva, and in the back of their mind, they have a list of, why didn't I hear from so-and-so? And in the meantime, so-and-so perhaps feels overwhelmed, doesn't know what to say, is too uncomfortable, doesn't want to deal with the issue of death, feels that they may just say the wrong thing and be more hurtful. Or maybe they think, they don't want to see me, they don't care about me. But I think we all know we've been in that situation where, why didn't I hear from so-and-so? Didn't get a phone call, I didn't get a visit, I didn't get a letter, nothing. And that too is hurtful. So figuring out where the sweet spot is between intruding and between disappearing, that takes a great deal of wisdom. And Rabbi Shimon doesn't help us. What he does help us is by telling us, don't intrude. Now is the time. They need to be alone. Even your best friend, even though you want to be there for them, even though you feel you might be able to help them, but they need some time on their own. And figuring out how much time, and then what do we say when we finally do show up? The hardest questions that there are, but ultimately that's what we have to figure out. So we'll leave it here. We'll pick it up next time. Wish you a good day.